Morning, everyone. We're going to be talking a little bit of looking into the Salem Witch Trials, and that's something that some people have asked me to make a video on because it's something of things that I have picked up on along the way. And it's kind of interesting, but it's also kind of disturbing at the same time, where there's times where it's okay to speak about it, and sometimes it's not okay to speak about it. So we're going to look through the cards and the runes, and we're going to do a little bit of scrying today through the crystal to see exactly what is going on with it. This might have to do multiple parts, but from what I have looked into with other people in the past, it was something that we could all relate to in the current date and time. So with that being said, we are going to do this. First is the Light Seers Tarot, and we're going to see what that brings out. So the first thing that they're showing me in mediumship is that when the township actually went through everything, it was just a normal day of life. And that when they did this thing called pertinence, when they do like own magic, it's kind of like a harsh type of a magician, like that was normal for them back then. They were as far as how they were characteristics, personalities, and anatomy and physiology, and how uh they were running back then, that they're showing me, they're like, you could do magic and that was normal, and it wasn't considered witchcraft because it was only for yourself. You just could not harm anyone at all, and that was the law. So it went really south all the time. So the Eight of Cups means is that there's something that was an illusion and a deception to a deceit when it came to that. And so when they came over in the 1600s for persecution, and it was because of persecution, there was a play on words. And when that play on words happened, everyone's like, you just couldn't understand. You just couldn't understand. So when you can't understand and you have the Five of Cups come out, that means that you literally just have to sit back and you just have to take in and evaluate like what was true and what was not at that moment. Because one moment they're showing me it was a walk out the door, and then the next minute when I make my eyes do that inadvertently and it's involuntarily, you just can't do it. You just can't do it at all. It was such an ill form of justice. You walked out the door and you just can't do it. And that's how you know it was almost like a stay put order, like a type of cease and desist that had no paperwork to it. So when they looked through a lot of these things, and they're showing me like in the 1400s, this was something that was well planted. This is well sown. This is well known. It was something that was practiced daily on this type of magician work. And magician is not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of people do use magician work, especially when they're grounding and they're centering and they're attuning. Some of us who actually have suffered like assault, they can do magic tricks. They can all of a sudden think of something and it happens. That is a form of manifestation. And it's just the movement of energy from the soul. It was definitely a breaking of partnerships. It was definitely something that couldn't contain. When you went through it, when you were going through your options, which is Seven of Cups, it was just boiled out. And then all of a sudden you would just turn and look at your outside your window, and there would be a cast iron like skillet or a like a Dutch oven, and they were doing something outside, and you just felt it. It's one of those premonitions that it was towards you or someone else. It happened so fast. It's like how we encounter criminal activity today. It's just you're walking down the street and all of a sudden it slams you. So when you have the Five of Pentacles in reverse, it was like a lack of a monetary value. It was incomplete cycle. They were looking to complete a lot of things, these individuals who were causing this type of incidents there. It was not meant to be a fiery start. So when they are showing me when they moved, like migrated through and landed, they're showing me Plymouth, they're showing me the East Coast, that it was meant to be at rest. So the Five of Wands, it was a type of struggle. And all of a sudden they had clarity. It was planned to move there. It was not exactly what they wished for, but it was strong and it was a breath of fresh air. They could finally breathe. The Ten of Wands showed a type of difficulty to a point of relief where it wasn't as bad. So that is when like the emotional rush would come through, and that that they knew that this was not the best of prudency that was happening around them where they had come before. But then all of a sudden, like something would come in with haste, like a gush of wind, and it had a lot of female energy, but it was they said it was balanced. It was balanced, and it was something that was imbalanced. And the face, it was like a caricature that they just showed me. It was very disfigured, like we see in the pictures of what they look like witches, and it was a formal recklessness. And it would destabilize. So when they would say, they showed me when you say a form of recklessness, they actually would put it into you and you would be reckless. And that is where they could not get that victory at all. And this was even prior to even the witch trials starting to happen. The lack of inheritance was way different, way different, way different. And they're showing me all the different forms of the words. So the Page of Wands in reverse just can't get it out at all. They just can't get it out. And it was like back then, as they knew, as a form of like a type of prostitution. It was a form of getting in. It was a form of a type of criminal activity that just can't be put out onto a video that has to do with like harming innocent lives. So that's where a lot of the people would say do no harm, and the rule of three, and that you had to protect the innocent and the animals. But you always had to worry about the backfire towards you. So when the rule of three came through, which is the basis and the knowledge of Wicca and a lot of like pagan and witch covens, is it wasn't really well thought out of at first. And that is where a lot of that beginning of that spark came through. And it wasn't necessarily a best beginning there. There was a lot of divorces and there was a lot of separations, but they would still live with each other. It was still, because as they're showing me, I'm getting these glimpses that everything was fine, that the husbands and the wives still stayed with each other, but they were divorced. They were divorced. That's all you need to know, is that they're divorced. It was recklessness and they're going to go their own way. And then they would walk away. And this is something of such a type of bad memory you just can't understand. You just can't understand. It was such a nasty vindictiveness that we have probably seen in our own lives that would cause this halt stop, that you just can't even do it. So when you meet at the crossroads, that is where they would get their security from that ill judgment. It would come in with a type of message like from spirit. It would come in from energy. It would be like a download or a dream, a type of divination that is a type of communication. But it was not correct intuitive downloads. It was not correct anything. That is where the happiness would actually come through on that. That is where legal and militia and military started to come in. And that is where the birth of the National Guard came through in Salem. And we will talk about the curse of the sheriff and how they started having heart attacks. So, with that being said, was there any form of addictions? Was there any form of anything that was causing these issues? Because as we know it today, if you are doing these things, there's a degree of mental health issues, there's a degree of substance abuse or unresolved problems. It definitely had a form of dishonor that you just couldn't understand. They could not do a complete out, and what they're showing me is like their gifts and their abilities that were fine to keep on, but as long as you didn't harm anyone, they were stolen. It was very disturbing, and that was where the balance came through, where they would sit and say it was good. So female energy came in and I acknowledged her by saying yep. And this was someone who could cut away at something. And back then that was illegal. It was still only female gifts to male gifts. And so you had to identify it. And that is what where rears its ugly head to a degree, because that is where the family upset would end up happening, because some were much stronger than the others, especially in a time of ill health or in poor mental health because they were a victim. And that is where they would lose a lot of their like their monetization. That's what they want to use coming through. They want to use monetization, and they want to say it was a type of celebration that you just can't understand. The Two of Wands, you can't even get it out. You would just look out the window and you would be sitting there quietly like this, stone, almost catatonic, and you couldn't participate. You can't participate. That is the point of the of Hierophant, which is like source, and then finding the dictatorship that was controlling it, because one minute they're fine and the next minute they're not, and they stay like that. And that is where true sorrow would come through, because they can't do anything. So they can't go to school, they can't go to work, and now we're going to lose the property. And it appeared like a form of apathy, but it was an illusion, it was a delusion, it was a form of mystery that was would give a rise up to you. There was forms of healing that could help during that time, but it was something that you had to hide on how to get rid of it. There was no like business opportunities that you could get to get this type of healing. You had to use what was called they're showing me, so I'm just searching right now. Basically it was like conjunction and conjuncture. So what we would know it as today is that it was a home visit. They would knock on the wood and then they would say, I'm doing a wellness check. And it was a big play on words. They were always checking water, they were always checking wildlife, they were always checking everything. And that's where we'll talk about where lore, and lore is when they tie certain curses, hexes, and spells to animals. um, that is where they had a hard time finding the hidden motives, but this was something that they had experienced before. They had experienced from where they had migrated. They're showing me like a formation like of a Germany. They see like Eastern Hungary. They see a type of like Eastern Asia. And it was such a solitude you couldn't understand. It truly would come in like a thief in the night. It would just come through, but something did come through at night and it was not well looked into. It was a blame of a not of a good skill at that moment. And with that being said, it was just not good manifested. It was just not good manifested. And that was their own words. And I see GOODE. It caused a pause. I see the gentleman that I have in the last 1 to 4 weeks. He's young, he's in his 20s, and he goes up the hill where they say something could have happened, and it was so unbeknownst in his face. It was almost like a move on, a move on. We were told they would move on, and it was right there, and it was a heinous scene, a heinous scene. That is where it had the uprise of wanting to go into court and into judicial properly. But trickery came through, and they keep doing like this as like a form of release. Tarot, the tower literally could not even like bring this out well. So we'll look into the runes. So with that being said, with this tower moment, this upheaval, it came crashing and burning. It was a type of a blame of misogyny. It was something that was an unfulfilled wish. It was also a lack of teamwork on that crime. It was also a lack of a lot of things, a lot of things. Um, Basically, this came through. I do see the port, but I do see a small raft, a small canoe that came through on the river. I see that it wasn't the finale at all. I do see it was a form of an ending of a solidifier. I am looking, it was like a quick glimpse of a chicken, but it wasn't a chicken. It was literally raven. It was like a raven. It was 16 animals. So that is like the type of deception that is unbeknownst. And usually what we know with that crime is usually like a unbeknownst, and it's very hard to track. It is something that is what we call fallible, unfallible, refallible. I'm getting those words, and you have to sit and you have to watch it, and it takes years to actually come and rear its head. Um, that is where a lot of them like to use their intuitive downloads and use their psychic, but you could not. They're saying like you just could not, because usually a lot of us who are psychic, we do a form of telepathy because we have to connect to everything. They had to use it a lot in the time of rest, and that was when the criminals would actually gain their wealth. It that big reveal that had happened was so bad, showing that they were not skilled, that you just couldn't make it up. It like the way I see it was exactly like Hocus Pocus, where the teens went out into the woods and did something. It was something that was not guarded. So there was like they're kicking the dirt and they're kicking the rocks. The magistrate. I see someone who is militia like, sheriff like, but not. I see a father. And that's when they were like dirty dealings, like a dirty dealing. And they say it was like their own word of pof. It was pof. So the next deck is the Gold Tarot, and this is a little bit of a harsher tarot. It takes really, really hard practice with this one. This one is almost in your face, and it's almost a daily occurrence that we can relate to. And it is a type of slinking around that you just can't get by and get known. But it is like a young offering that comes through. Showing me like the cranberries, like a holly berry that they would use and that was eaten, and it was intoxicating. They had to walk because then they were showing me through the struggle. They were very aggressive, and that is when the blame game came through. Now, it was very, very unbeknownst to apathy, because they would just stand outside with their arms crossed and look and say with no words in their own way that they were not getting involved with us at all. It was a feeling when you look at the card, almost like a type of hostage. And it was something of like a bad blood, a bad offering. They did want to stop communication, but basically what you need to know is that that was a hidden drive force. It ended in so many type of endings that slowly they were shutting down and shutting off, and that they couldn't use their permits. They couldn't do a lot of things at all. That is what would cause the pause. That is where they would literally just sit there and say, done. The wealth would come in a way that was unbeknownst and beknownst, but it was a lack of options. So when I look at it today, it's a boiling, like a boiling down effect. And when you look at it, like you're not of clear sound mind, but you're still in the family. That is where they were like, oh, I think we're at that crossroads. And it was something else would pop off. That would be the absolute struggle. And this is why I see them sitting down with like what they known as their legal team. And they're like, just don't even fight it. Just don't even fight it at all. So when you went to do that move on, it was a don't even go there. Just don't even go there, right in your face. And you would feel that force, and you would actually have pain in your bones. And then you would walk, and within like a 3 to a 4, they're showing me, you would actually break a bone. And that is where the dissolvement and the dissolution of marriages started to happen. And that is when young offers started coming through. It was literally the teenagers and the young people who would come through like their early 20s. And it was really heartbreaking, because as soon as it came through, they could not even get an offer, because it was already related, like it just runs in the family. Do you know what I mean? It runs in the family. So then when we look at it as what we know as like ties and tethers and running a line through something, when it runs through the family, it's a generational curse. And that's where we know exactly where it was today. And that's all it really was. Simply, it was such a tampering and a stealing of what they could, because that secured wealth for those criminals. Now, that securement with the 4 of Pentacles to the 2 of Pentacles, it was good. It was like 85 85% well. So they weren't well. So they literally had to up the ante. They literally had to up the ante to complete it out. And they kept saying it's completed out. So they made a partnership with individuals and something else to solidify that type of judgment to continue out. That it came rushing in, and I see in a November it finally arrived, but really it was like April 2 years prior that they started feeling it. They're showing me it took many years to get to a court of law, and they were so solitude that they did not speak. Um, the word irascence comes through on on a note about this, and it was a female that just sat there, and she was known as like a source, as sound, as the one to go to in the township. But she had her issues. She had a lot of issues. And that is the biggest confirmation, is that it was the Ace of Swords, just showing me again that face. And what I had learned as a nurse is that when they had too many ends on them, when I worked out in the community, it causes like a changing in the anatomy and the physiology, to where it changed the bone structure. So you couldn't tell if it was a male or a female. It was such an ill contract that involved everything of daily life, that even the Page of Wands, which is usually the fire starter, couldn't do it. And so they had to resort to a type of conjuring. This is one of the conjuring cards. And they had to sit by the light, by the candle, and listen slowly. You couldn't work on it hard enough at all, as much as you tried to be an apprentice. There was a lot of thought through and through, with windows of opportunity or a glip of a downtime to make that start. But you couldn't even do it anymore. That is where the imbalance is. And so is up and down, up and down, up and down. So when I start getting through the repetitive cards to the star, that is the wish fulfillment. And then all of a sudden we're happy. They're exactly where they need to be. So for me, they're showing a play on words. So I'm seeing multiple forms of the spelling of B. And then they want me to see the book. They had this book that they carried around, and it was very small. It was like a parchment paper, but it was oak paper. Well, I'm gonna do black obsidian runes on this. See how it goes. So birch, Bacana. The birth of that actually came through the day, which is Vega, to cause the freeze, ice. Ingwa, the living, comes through the power, the power. The flow of that power comes from the trolling. So when they would sit there, they had to be creative and look at rocks. They had to look at the leaves. They had to look at just anything about, and you couldn't think. That is where the will would come through, and everything else. It would be literally at night. And night also, it has a meaning of at rest, like the dark night of the soul. That would ash it completely, potentially. But you have to think of the estate That's mediumship. It's a gentleman. He's about like 20 to he passed away when around 40 years old. And there's something about a gift, faded but not faded. It was more of a destiny, like is they called it cold trum of a mix of a destiny, fate, and written. And that's why you just never knew exactly what was going on. And that is where they had their joy. That was Woon Hole. So Wool states that it was a type of strike of energy through the soul, through and through, that when you look at Rido and the ride, it was the circular motion of it that made like a hurricane effect, like an OAN. They're showing me, then they're showing me a large storm that happened. And I'm seeing the beach, I'm seeing like the Cape area, and I'm seeing that they did see a whale there. I do see a boat that was not ship, not raft, not canoe. It was very pertinent and disturbing when they found it, because they found books, and the books had been preserved that you couldn't read through, but someone who could actually put their hands, like a psychic reading of reading objects, you just couldn't. Don't touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it. And they would touch it and they said, I already know what to do. I already know what to do. That is where their luck came in for them. It had to do about a man. It had to do about the strength of the man that was the warrior. It had to do with about a lock, that something that was hidden within somebody. That is where their defense lied. So a lot of times too, when you look at degree of how someone maybe got hurt on how they can do a magician act, and how witches and warlocks and warlocks and all do their way of practice, is how they can retain energy and connect to source and maintain that energy and cast it out and bring it in. And that is where their wealth was. So in order to burn it out, torch it, it actually caused ulcers. And they're showing me like ulcers on the roof of the mouth, because I kept going like that all the time. They kept just showing me this. That means alone, 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 a bone, alone, a gone. And then when it went back to actual luck, you just couldn't even get a day. You just couldn't even get a day at all. So let's ask the wood rune, the poplar wood. What else do we need to know when they found the books? This was ill fate. This was a burnout. They would keep them running, and that game went to joy. And that reminds me of like low ball game and racketeering. That reminds me of a high ball, and it also reminds me of like Real Run Rich, that type of scheme, a Catch Me If You Can. That is where I see ash. There's something about ash around the town where they kept looking for the warrior. It was literally a set and watch. So where they have the horse, where they would put you in, it would be like the basketball game horse. And that is where they would show a stance of power. So during the day, they're showing me the Viking meaning of it, the pagan meaning of it. They got literally means stand and cut it out. So that is where you have to be like harsh, 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 harsh. And that wheel of luck will turn in a revert. And that's all they want us to know. At night, that estate, that heritage, now it went to its heritage. This is what we normally do. This is our way of life. But Hagal literally means that you got dysentery on the boat. Yeah, okay. Yep, yep. Now I have hand, foot, and mouth probably, and now I have dysentery. Yep, let's go get them. We have to go get them, everyone who's sick. It was so in their words, like a type of sadistic play, that it went to a discovery of the deceased that they thought moved out of town, to three kids causing blame, to they're showing me like a carousel act. And that is where we see a lot of the conjuring. Now, with that, how it flowed, they are going to move me back, and that is as dark as they want you to see it. So they had to troll it. They had to be creative with everything. So when they went out to just live it out, you had to secure your wealth. And what was your wealth? You had to be creative in what your wealth was, and you had to be strong about it. So you would gift them to freeze it, to give it all you got. So you would downgrade yourself to just instinct and intuition, to no gifts, to just be there. Which I think if I was staying there, I'd be a little bit far fetched. But then they're showing me the birch trees, and they show me living birch. That is where night, NITE, comes from. And that is where a lot of defense is. So they had to come up with like an apothecary theme, which what they were used to, but it had to be a game of who could do it best, who could do it better. So they're showing me one of the places that had to do with a game was the actual cemetery with the iron. And iron was considered a cast out then, but it also was considered a protection of a home. And it was something of a beknownst that I hear don't speak of yet. But there was one young man who was really good at what he did, and he would be disciplined in like a funny way because he took a piece of the iron. But then I see his motive, and I see he was pretty clever, but he was really, really good. And when they found out that they made that, it was such a protection of those who had passed away. We'll go to the Peach Moonstone runes. Very drawn to that. So a wa, which is very difficult to see here on the camera, it was a broken type of fate. That power that we would know today is something that the Day Watch would look out for. And when Fehu, which is the type of wealth that would come in, it would just be animals at that point. It would just be animals and what you could trade and barter. And then when you went about, that energy of flowing through would dissipate because it went their way, and they would call upon the luck. They would call upon the birch trees. There was something with the birch shavings that they liked. That joy literally would ash. So now they're showing me they would take the birch and they would ash it and they would do something like this. It was like seen before, seen in Kansas before, current date and time. It's been seen before in Connecticut. It's been seen before, Alabama, and near Ontario, Uh, that comes in on what we had seen it before, and he wants me to stop with the runes, and he wants me to go to small deck. He got said small deck, go to the small deck. Animals. White Sage Tarot. So he wants me to end it with this name, and I keep hearing this name all the time, and it's Gustafsson. It's Gustafsson. And it's a name that I have heard for years, and you just can't understand it at all. So this gentleman shows me the Falcon, and the Queen of Wands in reverse is per se one of the Falcons, but it was in reverse. That Ash, she didn't even know that one who controlled everything burnt her out. That would cause that lack of prudency. I do see the securement in the inheritance, the land, the property, everything that they had attained, but it caused a form of weakness. Now, the Eight of Swords is when she would flip her switch. I see one, but I see up to 145 individuals over 16 years doing this. But where were they? You didn't even know where they really were, but they did. They were just coming in. They were coming in. It was a type of marriage, of a type of love affair, and I see LUV that started the journey, but it was still a form of recklessness that would cause death because they couldn't maintain that power. They couldn't have that type of energy within them. They were weak at that time. And that's all that gentleman wants to say in mediumship. He's showing me one last vision of the book, and that was their judicial. It was as written. And that's all you need to know. So we are going to take another break.